Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Karen Curry Parker, and I'm really excited to be spending the next about 45 minutes with you talking about one of the basic concepts that we learn about in human design. We're going to be revisiting type. I'm going to walk you through a way of exploring your type through the lens of storytelling. So whether you're brand new to human design or whether you've been studying human design for a while, I'm going to share some information with you that hopefully is going to give you a really different way to start thinking about your type, the main character in your story, your strategy, and why following strategy is a prescription for bringing yourself back to baseline, and why that's just the beginning of the story, but not the whole story. So let's get started because I've got a lot of content for you today. So sit back, relax, and get ready to hopefully receive some new insights that will give you a deeper appreciation for yourself, for your journey, and give you a new way to think about the main character in the story of your life, your type. All right. Okay, let's get started. We're going to be talking about reclaiming the hero in your story and your human design type. So I'll start in case you don't know who I am, which you might not. My name is Dr. Karen Curry Parker. I'm the founder and the creator of Quantum Human Design and the Quantum Alignment System. I am a multiple best-selling author of many human design books. I have a PhD in integrative medicine where I explored the role of narrative on the immune system and how the story you tell about who you are and how you are can actually impact your immune response. When you take back control over your story and you tell really good stories about yourself, it actually improves your immune function. I've been an EFT practitioner, the emotional freedom techniques, that's what that stands for, since 2000. I was certified by Gary Craig. I have been using EFT in combination with human design since 2004 when I taught my very first deconditioning by design program that integrated EFT and human design. I've been a life coach since 1998. I studied with and worked for Ra Uru Hu in the early 2000s. I've been teaching and most importantly, learning about human design since 1999. I'm still learning. I am a Quantum University guest lecturer, a TEDx presenter. You can find my TED Talk about burnout on TED.com. I am also the host of Quantum Revolution and the Quantum Human Design podcast. I want to just share with you as we go through this material that if you are familiar with human design, you're going to hear me talk about human design with a little bit of a different vocabulary. And so you might want to take some time before we get started, push pause if you need to, and go to freehumandesignchart.com and run your chart. Because if you go here and run your chart at this link, it's going to give you what's called the quantum language. So we're going to be talking a little bit about quantum human design and what it is. And you may want to follow along with your quantum human design chart. So you'll get a traditional looking chart, except for the heart in the middle. But this chart will show up for you with different language than maybe what you're used to. Human design is a synthesis of Eastern and Western astrology, the Hindu chakra system, excuse me, Judaic Kabbalah, the Chinese I Ching, and quantum physics. So when we look at the system, even though it is in and of itself a very unique system, it is a synthesis of these ancient and modern archetype systems. What do all of these systems have in common? Well, they are all based on archetypes. All of these systems, the I Ching, Kabbalah, the astrology, it's all comprised of archetypes. Archetypes are simply an idea or a symbol, a pattern, or a character type in a story. So if you think about the line 2 in human design, which in traditional human design we call the hermit is just an archetype, right? The hermit, when we think about the hermit or the role of the hermit, that's usually somebody that likes to hide away, right? That's the hermit. Now, when we look at archetypes, and particularly when we look at archetypes through the lens of storytelling, so when you think about a story, A story has a beginning and a middle and an end. And usually in the beginning of the story, the hero or the heroine in the story starts off at what we might consider the low expression of the story, right? They're struggling, they've got ideas, sometimes they're feeling like something's missing from their life, they're in crisis, they're not really fulfilling the full potential. So let's go back to the archetype of hermit. If you've got somebody who is a main character in a story, and let's say that main character has a personality trait that's hermit, they have a hermit personality trait. At the beginning of the story, that could be a main character who maybe is spending so much time alone that they're not intersecting with the world at all. So think, if you're familiar with the story To Kill a Mockingbird, if you remember the character Boo Radley, he was a very, very hermetic character, right? He hid away to the point to where he was pale and pasty and everybody thought he was, there was something wrong with him, right? Another example of the hermit might be a new mama who maybe isn't getting enough alone time to recharge her battery. And so she's struggling because she's not getting enough hermit energy to be able to fulfill her full potential. As the story progresses, that main character moves from that low expression, that struggle, that disrupted part of the story, and they go through some kind of challenge or adventure. That challenge and adventure causes them to have to do something. They have to go through some kind of change, some kind of big exploration, some kind of transformation that brings them back to the baseline of who they are supposed to be. I'll use supposed to in air quotes. Okay, who they were born to be, the role they were born to fulfill. I say in this slide, I call it average, but we'll call it baseline, right? So this character goes from this low sort of struggle bus expression, right? And then they go through this transformation, some kind of cataclysmic event that brings them to this baseline average expression of themselves, this revelation, this understanding of, oh, this is actually who I am. This is actually what I need, right? As the story continues, and sometimes when we're reading stories, we don't hear the rest of the story. And actually, that's kind of true in traditional human design. As we read a story, or we learn a story, or we come to the conclusion of that struggle to go from the low expression to the average or the baseline expression, we don't always know what comes next in the story. And what comes next in the story is as this person begins to sink in and settle and relax into being the person they were born to be, fulfilling that baseline expression, because the nature of the universe is to grow. The divine imperative, if you will, of our own lives is to keep evolving, keep reaching, keep stretching, keep fulfilling our potential. We don't just sit at the baseline for most of our lives. Once we get comfortable with that baseline place, that place where we are fulfilling the story as it's intended for us to fulfill, then we want to take it further. We want to stretch it. We want to move it from that baseline expression to the exalted expression, or what I like to call the quantum expression. When we look at this through the lens of human design, what we see is that type is really the baseline expression, the way that it's taught in traditional human design. Conditioning, those places where we've forgotten who we are, that's really the low expression of the archetype. And once we sit at the fulfillment of type in the traditional way that we're taught type, then we learn to stretch it. We learn to reach and to push and to go beyond the beginning definition of who we are that we learn in traditional human design. So we're each living our own personal story. So your story is all the synthesis of all these parts in your chart. So if you got your chart out, you would see that your story is comprised of all these different archetypes. Every part of the chart is an archetype. And the totality of those archetypes, that's the story of who you are. In human design, we talk about how type is the most important thing to know about your human design. There are 5 types in traditional human design and in quantum human design. In traditional human design, the 5 types are the manifestor, the projector, the generator, the manifesting generator, and the reflector. In quantum human design, the evolved expression of the manifestor is the initiator. The evolved expression of the projector is the orchestrator. The evolved expression of the generator is the alchemist. The evolved expression of the manifesting generator is the time bender, and the evolved expression of the reflector is called the calibrator. Your type, if you're going to use the chart as a storytelling tool, your type would be the main character in your story. Your profiles, which we're not going to talk about, but just in case you're curious and you're a first line profile, your profile is really the personality traits of your type, and the centers and the gates and the circuits in your chart. That's really the curriculum, the story plot line, outline, or the storyline in your story. But your type is the main character. And we're going to really focus today on the type and maybe redefining for yourself your understanding of your type. For most of us, we've forgotten who the main character in our story is. This forgetting is called conditioning. So if you go back to our little scale, when we looked at the low expression is our conditioned expression, right? We forget who we are, we forget how we are, and we're trying to create a life that's based on what we were taught we should be doing or how we should be creating in the world. Each unique type has a purpose, an emotional theme, and potential challenges. And I'm going to break those down for you today in a way that hopefully will give you a reframe on maybe some of the challenges you might be experiencing in your life right now. Each type also has a strategy. So a strategy is basically a way to make decisions or a way to make choices. The purpose of strategy is to bring you back to your baseline so that you remember who, but mostly, and this is so important, how you were born to be. So I want to just stress really strongly that when we talk about human design, your human design is not really a what. You're not a what, you're a how. And really what the chart shows us is not so much what you are, because the what of who we are is so immense and so diverse and so very difficult to measure and codify. But the how gives us information about what we need to do to actualize the who. So really what that means is that your human design is a dynamic, breathing, moving, living entity. Your chart is really more of a verb than a noun. And when we talk about your human design chart, we're really talking about how do you tap into and fulfill the potential, that full spectrum of your story. How do you go from conditioned to baseline to ultimately quantum, or the exalted expression of the main character in your story? So we're going to go through in the next few slides the 5 types. I'm going to talk to you about them in the context of the full arc of the spectrum of the archetypes. We're going to revisit a little bit strategy. We're going to talk about the quantum purpose, and we're going to look at the emotional theme and how that emotional theme is giving you important information that can really help you actualize your full potential. So the first type that we're going to be talking about is called the manifestor. The manifestor is approximately 8% of the population, although I recently saw some statistics. By the way, those statistics about type, like how many types, that's all comes from software. So we've been measuring through software, we've been measuring how many of each type runs a chart. So if you actually looked at that information from a scientific lens, what you would know is that that's not necessarily a particularly accurate way to measure the global amounts of each type on the planet, because there are other parameters that go into getting a chart. What type gets a chart? Who's most likely to get a chart? Who, it makes the numbers a little less statistically valid when we start to recognize that there are a lot of factors that go into choosing to run a chart, and a lot of factors that create the numbers that we see. So it has been reported that it's about 8% of the population are manifestors, about 20% are projectors, 35% generators, 35% manifesting generators, and less than 1% reflectors. But again, those are loose estimates, so don't get too hung up on that. That was a weird first line rabbit hole that I just went down. So All right, the manifestor is a type that has what's called a motor to the throat. So there are 4 motors in human design. The first one is the will center. The second one is the sacral center. The third one is the root center. And the fourth one is the emotional solar plexus. So a manifestor has a direct connection through a defined channel, meaning a colored in channel, connecting a motor to the throat. So in this case, you'll see this is a person that has the root center, which is a motor connected to the spleen, connected from the spleen to the throat. So you have a direct connection of a motor to the throat, plus a manifestor will always have a white sacral center. That's this square, not at the bottom, but the square kind of up from the bottom square. The manifestor is unique in that they have an internal nonverbal creative flow, which I will talk about in just a minute. In the conditioned expression of the manifestor, and by the way, this is not an inclusive list. So if you're a manifestor and you're like, but I don't relate to that, or what about this? This is not an inclusive list. This is just a general list based on my interviews with different manifestors over the years. But generally speaking, what I see most consistently in manifestors when they are living out that low expression, right, that conditioned expression, they are oftentimes struggling with burnout. They're experiencing anger and all the things that come with feeling anger, particularly if you're a woman. You know, we don't get excited in our culture about an angry woman. They are oftentimes experiencing creative disruption and feeling like they can't do the things that they want to do. They can feel disempowered. And one of the things we don't talk about a lot, but I find is very common with manifestors, they lack in self-trust. They don't know how to read themselves. The baseline expression, when we go through that healing process, which by the way, traditional human design and the strategy for each type is really a healing process. It's a process that you follow your strategy for your type, that main character in your story, and you follow that strategy because it has a couple of really important functions. That strategy, first and foremost, especially that strategy along with authority, which we're not going to talk about authority today, we're just talking about type, but strategy and authority has a singular purpose. And that singular purpose is to bring you back in touch, get you back in touch with your physical body. Because what happens to us over time is that most of us are constantly getting messages from our body. Our body's telling us, yeah, do this, do that. This feels great. Go do more. This feels terrible. Don't do this, right? And we learn to shut that voice down. We learn to disconnect from the body because we can't always, in the way in which we are trained to forget, in that conditioning process, we are oftentimes trained away from those natural ways that we are. Our own natural and wild self gets quieted, and we learn to follow the rules, sometimes because it's what keeps us safe, right? We learn to do what we're told or to follow the formulas because these are the things we're trained to do to be successful in the world. And for many of us, we follow those rules so well, or we hide out so well to stay safe, that eventually when we grow up, we forget what our wild and natural self feels like. We disconnect from that voice in our body and then I find this to be true for a lot of my human design students and clients, until eventually something happens because you can't quiet that voice forever. The body gives us some kind of a signal. Maybe there's a disruption in your health, or maybe your life starts to fall apart, or your significant relationships start to implode. Something often happens, or we get burned out. That's usually the big one. Something happens and the body is screaming so loudly that we can't ignore it anymore. And when we hit that crisis point, that's often the beginning of our hero's story, right? I've arrived in this place where everything's come apart and I'm not who I thought I was, and I can't be who I was trained to be anymore. I can't forget who I am anymore. I can't drown out the screaming in my body. And it is time for me to remember who I am, who I was born to be. And so as you go through whatever that process might be in your own personal story, and you encounter human design, you learn to follow strategy. And strategy really is about bringing yourself back into your body and doing it for enough of a time. Ra used to teach 7 years. I actually think that process can be dramatically accelerated with other deconditioning tools like EFT. But I'll also say that process can be way longer than 7 years if you don't do your homework, so to speak. So you can know about human design and not do your inner work, not clear all of those places where you've forgotten, not work on your ancestral lineage, not work on your conditioning in your open centers, not explore your own lived experiences. And you can sit in that place, that less than baseline expression forever if you don't do your other work with it. But strategy is a really good doorway that opens us up to this healing process of remembering, what does it feel like in my body when it feels right? And what does it feel like in my body when it doesn't feel right? And how do I get so consistent with remembering what that feels like that it becomes part of my baseline? When you follow your strategy for enough time and you move to that baseline expression and it becomes so much a part of your habit, then you actually don't have to follow strategy anymore. Then you can start trusting your inner voice. Then you can start trusting that inner alignment and those inner impulses, because you can trust your body's response to your thoughts or your body's response to that wise voice inside of your head. But you can't jump the gun on this process. And that's why I oftentimes hesitate to teach this, because people will oftentimes try to skip this step, especially my manifesting generators, right? And they'll try to go straight from conditioned to quantum, skipping that baseline piece. And what is oftentimes for all types have to a certain degree, wait. Everyone wants to skip the waiting piece. You need the waiting piece. The waiting piece is so important, and your body needs the waiting piece in strategy, because that waiting piece allows you to really sink down into remembering, this is what my body feels like when it's headed in the right direction. This is what my body feels like when it's not headed in the right direction. And you learn to rebuild that relationship between your visceral connection to truth and how it feels, so that you can trust yourself and your body again. So for our manifestors, the manifestor's conditioned expression, when the manifestor learns to reconnect with that internal nonverbal creative flow. So if you're a manifestor, you have an internal nonverbal creative flow. That means when you move through the room, when you're in your inspirational flow, when you're in your creative flow and you're moving through the room, you're not thinking in words, you're thinking in action, you're thinking in flow, you're thinking in movement and momentum. And reconnecting with that is essential to moving you from conditioned to baseline. You have to remember what right timing feels like in your body. And really, the reason why I put self-trust in the condition expression here, or lacking in self-trust, is because I really find that for the manifestor, of all the 5 types, is probably actually the hardest for the manifestor to really tap into that inner sense of right timing and knowing when the timing is right to follow that creative flow. Because even though a manifestor doesn't have to wait for anything, but you do have to wait for inner timing. So even though it sounds like, manifestors, they can do whatever they want, you can when the inner timing is right. And that oftentimes means you have to wait, because you can't push against your own inner timing. The baseline expression of the manifestor is a person who is here to follow inner impulses and timing to create opportunities for yourself and others. Living true to yourself creates an energy field that inspires others to live more authentically. Now, what that means is that oftentimes when we talk about type and we talk about the manifestor's type, we say the manifestor has to initiate all the others. But what is that initiation really? It's not that as a manifestor, you have a job of going and telling people, now you go do this and you go do that and you go do this. That's actually the projector job, right? By living authentically, by being aligned with their internal nonverbal creative flow and their sense of inner timing, the manifestor inspires others energetically. Their authentic self-expression creates permission, if you will, energetically, creates energetically for others to be aligned with who they are and to do life their way. That's the initiation that the manifestor brings. Now, when the manifestor learns to feel into the body and to trust in their own inner timing, and they trust what that feels like, and they know themselves, and they know how their energy flows, and they're comfortable in that baseline expression, then they begin to move towards the quantum expression. And in the quantum expression of the manifestor, they fully embody that direct nonverbal connection to their authentic creativity. And then they can initiate action, but only when the timing feels right. It really is through pure embodiment of the self and of that creative force that is the manifestor that they can then initiate others simply by being who they are. So we say that the quantum purpose, the exalted purpose of the manifestor type, the initiator, is to initiate people into the frequency of transformation and creativity through their direct access to the quantum pulse. So the initiator is getting these downloads from source, if you will, these profound sparks of inspiration, and they are then waiting for the inner alignment for when the timing is right to then act on these sparks of inspiration. And by doing so, their very movement through the world then initiates others, because the initiator lives in a force field, an energetic force field of transformation and creativity. And by living in that field of energy and being that fulfillment of that field of energy, they create an initiation for others to do the same in their own way, Now, manifestors have an unnatural strategy, really. It's hard. It's probably the hardest strategy of all the types. The manifestor is here when to heal. Part of the healing prescription of the manifestor is to learn to inform others. Now, the manifestor learns to inform because the manifestor has to create space energetically and even logistically in their life to be able to follow that flow. And if they are not informing people about what they are about to do, they oftentimes lose momentum and energy trying to explain to people who have interrupted them or stopped them or gotten in their way, or who are with the best of intentions trying to help them. They lose their momentum and their energy when people don't understand what they're about to do. And so the manifestor has to learn before they leap into action to really take stock of, well, who's in my energy field? Who's going to be impacted by my actions? And who do I need to let inform? Who do I need to tell what I'm about to do so that I can follow through on my actions without losing my momentum? Because now I have to stop and tell you what I'm doing. Because what happens oftentimes for the manifestor is that when they use their words, when they have to stop and explain to someone what they're doing, language is actually at a lower frequency than that action frequency that they normally embody. And so when they have to stop that creative flow and drop down into language, they're actually slowing themselves down. And what will happen oftentimes for manifestors, if they have to start talking to people, they'll lose that flow, and then they experience the emotional theme of anger. Now, I don't like the word anger because I actually think it's not a very good description of what actually happens to a manifestor. I really think you have to think of it sort of like think of a volcano and a lava flow, right? So the manifestor is this lava flow. And if something disrupts this lava flow, it's a force, right? It's very difficult to stop a lava flow. In fact, it's kind of impossible, right? Or it's very difficult to put a boulder on top of a volcano and not eventually have it blown off, right? So when you have a manifestor and they get interrupted and they get angry, it's really kind of like trying to stop lava or trying to stop the force that is a volcano. And so it explodes, that energy explodes, and it's not really anger, it's actually creative disruption. And certainly one of the things we work on when we're working on the story of the manifestor, that movement from conditioned to manifestor to initiator. When we look at the arc of that story, one of the things we have to explore is how much creative disruption is your hero experiencing? And if a manifestor is in a situation where there's chronic anger, coming at them or them being angry with others, if anger is a chronic theme, it might be that, first of all, you're in an environment that doesn't support your creative fulfillment. Time to make a change. And number two, it might be that people don't get you and you need to do better at informing. And number three, you may be disconnected from your personal power. And chronic anger or chronic creative disruption is a very important thing to pay attention to if you're going to grow your character from being conditioned into that powerful transformative energy that is the initiator. So the challenge in the story of the manifestor often is learning to reclaim your power and oftentimes overcoming the feeling of aloneness. When you're with the right people who get you, who see you, when you inform, they're going to lovingly and gladly move out of your way. They're going to cheer you on from the sidelines without stepping on the road and asking you, hey, what are you doing? And stopping your creative flow. And it is completely possible for you as a manifestor to be completely supported and not be stopped in the pure expression of your creative self. So some things for you to think about if you are a manifestor is, do you express your full power or do you hide? And is anger keeping you from fulfilling your power? How much anger are you experiencing in your life, and is it stopping you? Our next type are generators. The generators evolve into the alchemists. A generator is going to have a defined sacral. That's this square right here. That's not the bottom square, but the one in the middle. And they will not have a motor connected to the throat center in any way. So the sacral won't make it to the throat. The will center can be colored in, but it won't make it to the throat. The emotional solar plexus can be colored in, but it will not connect to the throat. And the root center can be colored in, but it won't be connected to the throat. When we look at the expression or the arc or the spectrum of the experience of the archetype of the generator, we see that in the conditioned expression, the generator experiences frustration, quitting, feeling unfulfilled or mediocre, and burned out. In the baseline expression, they learn to trust their gut and follow what feels right and aligned. When you engage with fulfilling work, you tap into a quality of life force energy that is enduring. And so the generator and that conditioned expression, they've learned to really sense and feel and know that inner humming that is the gut, their gut feeling. They've learned to follow it. They're doing the right work. They're in the right place with the right people. They've tapped into a frequency of life force energy and it feels good. They remember what their body feels like. They remember what their gut feels like. And they're able to sense and feel viscerally what is right path, what is the right direction, and what is not. Beyond the baseline expression, when we move from the baseline to the quantum expression, the alchemist learns how to achieve mastery over the physical plane. So the alchemist, the generator, they have the potential to be masters of what they respond to and what they create. What changes for the alchemist from the generator is that oftentimes now what you're responding to is internal. You're not waiting just for the external, but you're waiting also for the internal. Those, again, as I said, you're able to discern between the voices in your head that are giving you ideas that are important and inspiring versus maybe the monkey mind that's going, I could do this, I could do that, I could do this, in a frenetic response to feeling frustrated or stuck or blocked. You start to be able to tease out and to feel and sense the difference between right inner guidance, divine guidance versus something that popped up in your conditioning field that's now causing you to feel anxious or nervous or like you have something to prove. The quantum purpose of the alchemist is to physically manifest creativity and express it through devotion. So when we look at the generator process, and by the way, if you're a manifesting generator, you should also be listening to this. And if you're a manifesting generator, anything that I may have said about the manifestor type, you might also relate to that as well. So for the generator has what we call a stair-step learning curve. It is normal and natural for a generator when they first start to do something new to have a surge in the beginning where they really learn quickly and they get they really start to progress and become masterful over whatever it is they just started, right? So in the beginning, if you're a generator type and you learn to play tennis, in the first few months of lessons, you might be really good at it. You might learn quickly. Maybe you learn to hit the ball. Maybe you learn to serve, right? Maybe you learn to hit the ball back. That's always a big thing for me in tennis, right? And as you practiced and practiced and learned, eventually, and this is what happens in the generator process, you hit a plateau. And in that plateau, it doesn't matter how much you practice, how much you do, how much you try, how much you keep pushing, you don't make progress. And you sit there and you think, okay, well, I suck at this and I'm really bad at it and I'm never going to learn. And you get frustrated. Now, that can happen in so many different ways. It can happen at work too, right? You get a new job, you get a new position, you do really well, you're really acing it, and you've got it down and you're like a machine cranking out good work consistently, and all of a sudden everybody else is getting promoted, everybody else is getting recognized, and you're not, right? And you're sitting there and you're starting to feel stuck and frustrated. These are all normal ways that this generator experience happens. That is natural and normal for the generators to have a beginning cycle that has a lot of momentum and then a plateau cycle that feels like it doesn't have momentum, like you're stuck. Now, what happens to a lot of generators, because really here's the secret sauce for the generator story. It's not so much what you do. It's not really what you do as a generator that matters. It's the fact that part of what you're here to learn is to learn how to learn and to become a master learner and become masterful at mastery. And in that process of becoming masterful over mastery, you begin to learn how to work on the material plane. Although obviously you want to be doing something you love and that excites you and turns you on as well. But really, the big goal is for you to do something you love and be masterful at it and to learn how to be masterful at things. So for some generators, that might be learning how to do one thing really, really well over the arc of your entire life. And for some generators, it might mean that you have a couple of cycles over the arc of your life where you get really good at one thing and then you figure out, okay, I think I've learned everything that I can from this experience. I'm going to go do something new. And then I'm going to do something new maybe later on down the line. So when I say devotion and manifesting creativity, I'm not talking about necessarily doing the same thing, although repetition and correction and repetition and correction are part of the generator process. I'm talking about learning how to learning how to become really good at the learning process. And so for the generator, you have to learn, how do you manage yourself in that beginning cycle when everything feels amazing and fast and cool and easy, or maybe complex, but it's moving, it's got momentum, right? And how do you learn to interpret that plateau correctly? Because the generator really has to learn how to interpret that plateau, because something's happening on that plateau that is essential. And there are really two different things that are happening on that plateau that are essential, and you have to figure out which one of those two things is actually going on. So the generator, when they sit on a plateau, they are discovering that either A, this is the right opportunity for me. I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm sitting here feeling frustrated because actually what's happening is I'm building momentum because I'm on the cusp of a breakthrough. And as soon as I'm ready, that breakthrough is going to happen. And I'm going to go up another level in mastery. So I'm going to hit another surge and I'm going to enjoy that surge. Maybe you're going to get a better job offer. Maybe you're going to master a new skill. Maybe whatever it is that you've been working so hard on, it finally clicks and whoo, you hit that rocket ship of momentum and all of a sudden you're better, right? If you read stories about athletes, it's such a common thing to hear about an athlete, like they'll get the flu and they'll be off for 2 weeks sick. right? And in that time that they're off and they're not practicing and they're not doing anything, all of a sudden they go back out and now they're breaking a world record and they didn't do anything except they stopped, right? That plateau is part of the generator process. The second thing that has to happen when you sit on that plateau is you have to decide, do I stay here and wait for the breakthrough? Is the breakthrough mine? Is it coming? Or is this an experience from which I've learned enough? I got everything I needed to get from this experience, and now it's time for me to quit and start something new. Now, most generators will get stuck in that quit cycle pretty quickly. They'll get up, they'll have that first surge in mastery, they'll hit that plateau, and then they'll quit. First surge in mastery, hit the plateau and quit. Surge in mastery, plateau and quit. And so oftentimes what the generator has to learn is how to feel within their body. Now, the generator has a motor called the sacral motor. That motor is a nonverbal motor. And that motor responds to life through and and So the very first thing you have to do when you're moving yourself from the conditioned expression to the baseline expression, if you're a generator, is to learn to start responding to things that show up in your outer world with or The reason why this is important is it gets you out of your head and it drops you back down into this gut level kind of primal response. And it helps you remember, what does the right thing feel like in my body? And what does the wrong thing feel like in my body? And it keeps you connected to the body so that your mind doesn't talk you out of it, because it will sometimes, because your body's going to tell you what's right for you. And when you follow that enough times and you start taking yourself onto a course and a path through that expression, through that response, then you start to shed all those stupid things that you're doing that are occupying your energy and your time. And you start to be using your energy in the way that's right and aligned for things that are passionately aligned with who you are, things you want to be doing. And when you do that, you unleash this life force energy that makes you feel really excited about life, that obliterates mediocrity, right? That obliterates living life at half steam and numbing yourself out with Netflix or whatever else you might numb yourself out with. So your job is to learn how to respond, how to make those sounds, how to follow through the growth curve, how to interpret that plateau, and ask yourself and ask your gut, am I frustrated because momentum is building and I'm on the cusp of a breakthrough? Or am I frustrated because I'm not in the right place anymore and it's time for me to quit? And when you can learn to get into your body and really trust your body's response and not react to being frustrated, but to use frustration as a deliberate signal to encourage you to check in with yourself, you'll be able to really move your energy properly and keep channeling it in a direction that allows you to expand in your mastery. Now, when you really get it, you can start responding to your thoughts and ideas. You can start responding to that thing that drops in while you're in the shower. That sacral response, that visceral response will no longer be dependent on the external, but you can start to really trust how it feels on the internal as well. And then you begin to fulfill your purpose as the alchemist, which is to physically manifest creativity and express through devotion. So as I've been sharing, your strategy is to wait to respond. The emotional theme is frustration, which is actually a symptom of momentum. And you have to decide, is that momentum going to be continued by waiting for the next surge in mastery, or is it time to quit? The challenge in the story of the generator is to master endurance, learn how to sit with the frustration, especially if you're not responding to quitting, and be with it and not take it personally, but to instead say, okay, I'm frustrated. This is momentum building. Everything's going to be okay. I'm going to wait this out until I get the breakthrough. And sometimes we have to learn to trust in source. We have to learn to trust that there is a bigger story unfolding here, and that you won't be waiting for the breakthrough forever, even though sometimes when you're a generator, it can feel like forever. So some contemplations for the generator. Am I expressing my mastery, or am I settling for less? Is frustration keeping me from my masterful destiny? Am I quitting and quitting and quitting and quitting and not staying with those things that I need to long enough to experience the breakthrough and the momentum. Our time benders are kind of a hybrid type. So as I said, everything that I talked about for the manifestor is true for the manifesting generator, except for a manifesting generator will have sustainable energy, whereas a manifestor tends to have boom and bust cycles with their energies. Everything that I said about the generator is also true for the manifesting generator. The stair-step learning curve and that internal sacral sound, that gut level feeling also is true for the generator. So when we talk about the manifesting generator, we're really talking about a generator who can respond quickly. And when they respond, they drop into that internal nonverbal creative flow. That's the manifestor part. And then they're zooming, right? So you've got wait to respond. You've got that but then once you get that or then you zoom. Then you go quickly in that internal nonverbal creative flow. There's one other piece that's unique to the manifesting generator. The manifesting generator skips steps. They're supposed to skip steps, by the way. It is the job of the manifesting generator to skip steps because part of their life purpose is to find the fastest, easiest way to do things. And so a manifesting generator will skip steps, but sometimes the steps that they skip are important steps and they have to go back and complete them. They're here to experiment with which steps do I skip and which ones do I not skip. What oftentimes happens, though, is because the manifesting generator has a lot of energy, most of them will experience it as a lot of energy. They tend to not only skip steps, but also multitask. They're oftentimes trying to see how many things can I get done at the same time, or they're working 3 or 4 different angles simultaneously, and people will judge them for that. So if you are a manifesting generator and you've experienced judgment for that, stop. Because that you're actually doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Other people who are not manifesting generators will tell you, you need to slow down. Don't. You need to pick one thing and stick with it. Please don't, unless you respond to that. You need to not be doing so many things and simply focus on doing one thing. That is also not okay for you. You have so much energy, you need to move a lot because if you don't, it sits in your body and that's not good for you. So you are going to be just like a generator, except you're going to move faster, but actually you're not moving as fast as you think you are because sometimes you have to go back and skip steps. You will be multitasking. Not everything you do will work out. That's normal. You're supposed to be experimenting and exploring. Some of the things you're doing to burn off energy. And when you do get into action, when you are in that momentum phase, you also need to inform before you take action. Because you have that internal nonverbal creative flow, just like the manifestor. And that internal nonverbal creative flow is a really important and powerful part of your creative process. And you don't want people to stop you or try to help you or cause you to have to communicate while you're in your flow about what you're doing, because that will make you feel angry as well as frustrated, which is your emotional theme. So when we look at the baseline the conditioned expression for the manifesting generator, we see that the conditioned expression, very similar to a generator, is frustration, quitting, feeling unfulfilled or mediocre, burnout. And then from the manifestor, we have anger and creative disruption. So that chronic anger can also be a symptom of being creatively disruptive in a chronic way. Once you learn to wait to respond, trust your gut, use that response to things coming at you in life, then you move from that conditioned expression over time to that baseline expression. The baseline expression is, basically learning to live life as a series of learning adventures through practice, exploration, experience, and learning to trust your gut to follow what feels right and aligned. Over time, you evolve that baseline expression into that quantum expression where you become the time bender. And as a time bender, your role in life is to find the fastest, most effective way to do things. And you are designed to delight in your learning and to find the quickest path to mastery. And you will do that by skipping steps. And you will do that sometimes by having to go back and repeat steps. And you will do that by doing many things at once. And that's normal for you. So the time bender, the quantum purpose of the time bender is to physically manifest creativity and speed up the quantum process and linear time. So you may find that you are capable of doing way more than the average person in a shorter amount of time, and that is your gift as a time bender. And once you do that, by the way, then you can turn around and show other people what's actually the necessary steps and which ones can you skip. So your strategy, just like with the generator, is to wait to respond, but it's really essential for you as a time bender that you also, once you respond to something, take a moment, envision in your mind, what would that look like? What would that be like? Inform, tell the people around you who will be impacted by your decision, right? And then take action, right? So wait, respond, envision, inform, and then act. Your emotional theme is anger and frustration. So that anger is that creative disruption when you forget to inform. And the frustration can be, of course, momentum, sitting on those plateaus. You will sit on plateaus just like generators, although you'll tend to leapfrog over some of them. And of course, working with aloneness and feeling disconnected from source, just like with the manifestor and the generator. Your theme, your learning curve, your curriculum is to learn to surrender, to trust the process, and to not, I always tell my manifesting generators, just because you can, and you can, doesn't mean you should. And so the manifesting generator often has to learn to wait and trust the process. So explorations for you as a manifesting generator is, are you expressing your mastery or are you settling for less? And is frustration keeping you from your masterful destiny? I might also add that if you have chronic anger going on, are you in an environment that supports your creative fulfillment? Are you in an environment, do you need to shift and change your environment or communicate better so that people around you won't be so disrupted whenever you spring into action? Our next type, the projector. The projector has an open sacral, just like we saw this again with the manifestor, but no motors to the throat. So they can have motors colored in, like you'll see down here. Here's a projector that has a root center and an emotional solar plexus defined or colored in, but you see there's no connection between these two motors and the throat. So you have an open sacral and no motor to the throat. When we talk about the projector, we are looking at what I consider to be one of the most important types. Obviously, all types are important, but we don't function well without projectors. We need projectors. The projector has a role, a job in the story of managing and guiding the others, okay? So it's your job if you're a projector to manage and guide other people, but you're not here to manage and guide everyone. You're here to manage and guide your people. And your people are the people who see and know your value. So if you are a projector, you're here to let yourself be found by the people who value you. And when they see you and they value you, then they ask you for your insights and your advice and your input. And then you get to share that brilliance that is so naturally a part of who you are with these people. They hear you, they see you, they value you, they give you energy and support so that you can continue to serve as a vital resource for their efficacy and for their fulfillment. But you have to be managing and guiding the right people. That's a big, big caveat, which I'll talk about in a second. So in the conditioned expression of the projector, we see the potential for burnout. The emotional theme is bitterness, which we'll talk about in a minute. Not knowing when enough is enough. Sometimes you'll see shame because you can't do things the way other people do things. You don't have necessarily the push. You don't have necessarily the sustainability to keep pushing and pushing at something that doesn't feel right. And so oftentimes it seems to you like you can't do things the way other people do. And there can be shame associated with that. And of course, when you can't create the way everybody else creates, it can feel shameful. And it can really impact your sense of self-worth, your sense of value. The projector strategy is to wait to be recognized and invited. And I want to add this because I think this gets misconstrued a lot in the way in which we talk about and teach human design. You're not here to be invited to the little things in life. You don't need to wait for an invitation to go to dinner, to do your laundry, to fill your gas up with car, to ask for people for help with gas money. You don't need to wait for the small things in life. You are here to wait for the big invitations. That's invitations for work or for moving or even for love. The big things in life require an invitation or recognition. The little things, do not wait for the little things in life. You are way too valuable and way too precious to sit around hoping someone's going to send you a text message to see if you want to go to a movie tonight. You don't need to wait for that. You need to wait for the big invitations in life. Now, learning to wait for that recognition and attention allows you to step into your value. And when you step into your value, then basically what happens is when a projector steps into their value and they really hold that value, they understand, I'm here to offer something really important to people. I'm here to wait for the people who really see what I have and who really need what I have and recognize it. I'm so inherently valuable and precious that I need to take care of myself. I need to set good boundaries. I need to protect my energy. I need to rest when I'm tired. I need to make sure that my body and my spirit stay sustainable so that I am available when the invitations come. When a projector can do, and as a projector, sorry, one other piece, you need to know how to say no to the bad invitations. When you value yourself, you don't take bad invitations and you don't get yourself quagmired in a situation with people who don't really see your value, who use you, who take advantage of your wisdom, who oftentimes don't even give you credit for it and then leave you feeling depleted and exhausted and hurt. You don't deserve that. So you have to work on your value. And so when a projector is following their strategy and waiting for the recognition and attention, really what's happening is the universe is saying, hey, you just encountered this really important information. And you've probably been living your life pretty off course. You probably have not been living as a projector ever. Most projectors aren't. And that means you need to stop everything. Because more than anything, you probably need to rest. You need to restore, replenish, restock, and heal your body. And you need time to heal your self-worth. Because until you do those two things, you're not going to get an invitation. And that's not a problem. I mean, it'll feel like a problem, but it's actually the cosmos loving you. The cosmos is saying, honey, I'm sorry. You forgot how precious you are. You lost connection with the beauty that is you, that once in a lifetime cosmic event that is you. Time out. We're going to push pause. You're going to get a cosmic pause. This is also, by the way, really the cosmic purpose, if you will, of burnout. You're going to get this pause. And in this time that we're giving you to recalibrate, I want you to heal your body and heal your sense of self-worth. Because when you get those two pieces back online, you will be a radiant, attractive force, and people won't be able to stop inviting you to things. And when they start inviting you back to things, don't take the dumb invitations, only take the good ones. So that's going to move you out of that conditioned expression back into that baseline where you protect your energy by waiting for the right people who see your vision and value you, and they recognize and invite you to share your guidance. Now, when you sit in that space for long enough, then you start to move into that quantum expression. And in that quantum expression, you're not necessarily doing work, if you will. In that quantum expression, what you're doing is you are managing and guiding the energy simply by being. When you walk into the room, you see the potential. You understand what needs to happen. And you hold your value so well that you can walk into a room and say, hey, I have an idea. And I'd like to share it with you. Is that all right? And you'll be able to initiate that guidance without waiting for the right people. Because you'll begin to recognize who are the right people. You won't be managing, guiding everyone, because you can as a projector. You totally can. But you'll be valuing yourself enough that you place yourself in the right place with the right people. And you can begin the process of inviting people into the fulfillment of the potential without having to be initiated by the recognition and attention of others. The other thing that we have to talk about is the projector. When you move to that orchestrator energy, you're doing something else that is really not as tangible as some of the other types. And I just have to say that in the beginning of my career as a human design specialist, almost all of my clients were projectors. And I would say all of my projector clients were burned out, except for one. I had one woman who was an artist, and her parents just knew intuitively how to raise her well. And she was 50 years old and living an extraordinary life as an awakened projector. One client in 10 years. What I found was that a lot of my projector clients were exhausted, even though they technically weren't doing any work, as they would say. But what I also found is that their energy shifted and changed according to what was going on in the world around them. And so what I really believe is happening, and this is the orchestrator expression of the projector energy, this is the quantum expression, is that the projector holds the energy template. That's not the physical work, that's the energy template of what's to come. And part of what the projector does is they're clearing the vibration. You're managing and guiding the vibration of collective consciousness. And so I started saying to my projector clients, projectors are holding down the grid. You are literally holding together the energetic infrastructure of what we're building on the planet. You're holding together the energetic infrastructure of what's to come, and you're making sure energetically it's clear. And oh my God, and my projectors relate to that in a very big way. And so I want to say that when you evolve into that orchestrator energy, your very presence holds together the template of possibility, and your very presence manages and guides that energy in response to what you see as necessary for the work to come in and fill in the potential later down the road. You're clearing the grid. You're keeping consciousness cleared so that we can continue to build a world that is the fulfillment of the potential of the human story, because you get it. You know exactly what needs to happen. So if you think you're laying on the couch doing nothing, you're not. You're actually holding the whole world together. The strategies we talked about for the orchestrator or the projector is to wait for the recognition and attention until you hit that baseline piece. Let's talk about bitterness for a minute. Bitterness is a symptom of depletion and low self-worth. Think about it this way. If you're bitter, I'm going to use a word I hate to use because I hear this used in a way when people talk about auras in human design, and I hate it. But bitterness is repelling. The energy of a bitter person makes you want to back away. It doesn't pull people in, it pushes people away. And that's actually a good thing. Because when you are a projector and you are depleted and you have low self-worth, you're exhausted. Your bitterness is a symptom of your exhaustion, and you push people away with the bitterness because you're not available for an invitation. Your body is tired. Your self-worth needs healing. And if you try to get an invitation when you're feeling that way, you're probably going to take an invitation that's going to keep making you depleted and is going to further challenge and hurt your self-worth. So bitterness is actually a really important energy. It's an energy that if you have somebody in your life who's a projector that's bitter, really hear that, because they are telling you in so many words or not words that they're tired and they need to be valued. And so support them, because sometimes projectors can't see themselves very well. Support them in really learning how to interpret that bitterness as exhaustion and low self-worth. The challenge for the projector is to heal, of course, their self-worth and their energy. And oftentimes they have to really overcome that wounding of feeling abandoned by God, or wondering, like, why did God make me this way? God made you this way because the world needs you right now. So heal your self-worth and your energy so you can get to work doing what you were created to do. Some contemplations for the projector are: do you value yourself or devalue yourself? And is bitterness masking your value? And do you have the energy for the invitation? And if not, rest. Take care of yourself. Last, but definitely not least, are reflectors. Less than 1% of the population. When you see a reflector chart, all of the centers are white. So all of these geometric shapes called centers are white or open. The role of the reflector is to reflect back to the community the energy that the community is holding. So the reflector takes in all of this energy. They're taking it all in, they're feeling it, they're amplifying it, and they're expressing it. And basically, the reflector becomes a mirror, a way of us to gauge, a way for us to gauge how are we doing as a community. In the conditioned expression, the reflector is burned out, disappointed. They don't know when enough is enough. They feel shame, oftentimes because they also cannot do things the way others do them. They can feel codependent, and they oftentimes can feel a lot of pressure to make decisions faster than is easy for them. The reflector has a very unique decision-making process or a very unique strategy. The reflector needs to wait a minimum of 28 days. That's enough time for the moon to go through all of the gates around the mandala, all the 64 gates, and highlight different parts of the reflector chart. And in going through that experience of the chart change and how the chart changes, it gives the reflector time to really feel their way through all those changes and to know whether something is right for them or not. The second thing that a reflector needs to make good decisions, or an important part of strategy, is they need to be able to talk through their decisions. A reflector literally needs to reflect externally their choices, and they need to be able to talk through their decisions, because it's not until they start to hear themselves and feel and sense themselves in the reflection field of others that they can bounce things off of what they need to, bounce decisions off of others and really have a sense of what's good and right and correct for them. By the way, projectors oftentimes need to do this too, that sometimes projectors need to hear the conversation to be able to figure out what's right for them. The reflector, when you are taking your time and waiting those lunar cycles for those big decisions, the reflector baseline expression is all about learning ultimately how to be at home within yourself. So you might feel as a reflector, you learn to really feel into, am I in the right place? Do I feel good here? Am I with the right people? Do I feel good here? And you start to really understand that right place, right people really facilitates inside of you an energetic experience that feels aligned. Ultimately, as you move from reflector to calibrator, you start to learn how to be at home within yourself, regardless of what's going on around you or regardless of what environment you're in. And so you are no longer a victim, if you will, of your environment. And you learn to instead be able to be in a place and feel the energy around you and not let it disrupt you or disconnect you from your own sense of the heart of who you are. That is what happens when you move from the reflector to the calibrator expression. And as the calibrator, you're able to walk into a room and literally embody, show people what is the potential. So you could have, so let's break this down. With all this openness as a reflector, openness is a source of wisdom. So anything in your chart that you have open is where you experience others, and that experience of others allows you to really know the full potential of the human story. In your experience of all these different ways of being that you have with all this openness as a reflector, you start to become wise about what's the fulfilled potential. What's the fulfilled potential of the human condition? And when you begin to really get that and embody that, and instead of being this amorphous sort of reactive person that's experiencing all this energy and taking it in and becoming it, but rather you learn to understand the potential of the human story as a calibrator, and you walk into a room embodying that potential, you literally calibrate the energy in the room. It's nothing you have to do. It's nothing you have to say. In a lot of ways, it's very similar to the manifestor or the initiator experience. Of course, with the initiator, it's about doing. We watch the initiator doing authenticity, and we feel like we could do authenticity too. With the calibrator, we see the calibrator be authentically aligned with the full potential of the human story, and it encourages us to be that as well. And so we begin to use the calibrator as a reflection to gauge How close are we to experiencing the full potential or not? You know, one of my favorite examples of calibrator energy is Rosalind Carter. And if you go back, if you have I would encourage you, go find Rosalind Carter's memorial service and listen to what people said about her. Rosalind Carter was a reflector. You can tell from all these different eulogies and all these different stories that she was absolutely the calibrator, that her presence in a room lifted the whole room up and really brought out the best in everyone around her. So the quantum purpose of the calibrator is to measure through reflection the human condition and the human potential. The challenge, though, is all that openness. There's two challenges really for the reflector. The first challenge is taking the time, giving yourself the time you need to make good, strong, healthy choices, because you need that time for clarity. And if you don't take that time, you're going to find that you're making snap decisions and jumping into things and jumping out of things and jumping into things, jumping out of things, and nothing's going to feel right. So you need the time. And you need to give yourself the time without the pressure. The second thing that can often happen for the reflector is because so much of the reflector experience feels inconsistent, you crave those consistent places that make you feel stable and grounded. And that means sometimes that consistency comes from your relationships. And sometimes, because you can see the potential, you have a tendency to fall in love with the potential. This is, by the way, also true for projectors. And when you fall in love with that potential and you cling to it because you know it and it's consistent and somebody's not actually fulfilling the potential, then you're stuck in that relationship and you're spending a lot of energy trying to drag someone into their evolution. And because you need so much time to make change, it takes you a while to get out of it. And so sometimes you experience the emotional theme of disappointment. And that disappointment comes from two places. Number one, it's disappointment for yourself because you made a snap decision and you didn't wait for enough time. You didn't take enough time to make a good choice. And now you're disappointed in your decision and maybe you're stuck with it. Maybe you bought the wrong car, right? The second source of disappointment is disappointment in others and in the human story. You know the potential, you feel the potential. And when you're in love with the potential and somebody's not fulfilling the potential or humanity is not fulfilling the potential, it can be deeply disappointing. The clue, the cue, the fix, the cure, take your time and make sure the people in your life are walking their talk before you move in and make a big commitment. Contemplations for the reflector include finding the courage to extricate yourself from people who are misaligned. So in other words, finding the courage to get out of situations where people are not fulfilling their potential and cultivating the faith that if you take your time, everything is going to be okay, not letting the pressure win. Some contemplations for the reflector is, can you be, or are you actually being merged with others? And have you lost yourself in that merging? And is disappointment keeping you from relaxing and trusting and from being who you are? Remember that you get to choose how you express your story. You get to decide how your main character is going to live out the story. Please make sure the story that you're telling about who you are and how you are is a good story. You deserve a really, really good story. I want to just lovingly and gently remind you, if you loved this information, if you sparked some kind of inspiration in you, you can learn more about quantum human design at freehumandesignchart.com. Or if you want to learn more about all the different parts of the chart and the quantum expressions, go to amazon.com. You can purchase my book, The Encyclopedia of Quantum Human Design. It's a full color. It's actually a resource guide that goes through all the parts in the human design chart and talks about the entire arc of the human design story and how the quantum expression, the evolved expression of the parts of the chart can help you discover what you're growing towards. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with me. Thank you for sharing your energy with all of us. Thank you to Jazz for hosting this amazing event. And I hope you have a good summit. Make sure you watch all of the programs. You've got some amazing, amazing, amazing teachers here. And thank you. Thank you.